Hello, hello. Episode 288. This is a switcheroo from previous episodes. You are laboured with Robin and I instead of Josh and Adam because it's Easter and Easter things happen. But Robin, how are you? How's things?
Yeah, all good. I feel like I haven't done one of these for a while, so
Yeah,
that's
me
'cause
too.
I haven't done one of these for a while. That's why I feel like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's just life, right? I think that's
Yeah.
that's the thing. That's why there's four of us. So, but yeah, how's your Easter?
Yeah, very nice, thank you. I'm just saying, I'm full. I've eaten too much, but other than that, it's all right. What about you?
We'll burn some calories.
You're
off
lining
by,
up for that, are you? I think. What
yeah,
time were you like?
well, it's like it's 11:30 for me. So yeah, I think my fiance and her family are Jewish, so like Easter's not as much of a thing. And we don't even get the days off over here in the US, so it doesn't even
Oh
feel
yeah, I
like
was
anything.
reading that in the
So
paper as well. It seems a bit
yeah,
random.
so this
I'm
is
surprised Trump hasn't like mandated that yet, but
hey, never say never. So alongside a lot of other things. So but yeah, I'm also good. Thank you very much. Like I said, it feels like a while since I've done one of these. So it feels like our parents have given us the keys to the car, and we're going to try not to crash it.
yeah, I mean, I was going to be positive, but it's like we've already got a comment in from, which is like,
yeah,
I was going to try and stay away from that exact path for a little bit of time, but
right. So
let's get to that when we get to it.
Yeah, we'll pile in when we get the chance, right? I think we try and maintain some chronological order to these. Going into Brentford away, so that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about today, off the back of a couple of losses and some really turgid form, to be completely honest. So we'll talk about the teams as well and what we saw there. We saw Weaver come in and pretty much O'Reilly also with another start as well. But just a quick one from you. Again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but at the time when you saw the teams, etc., how were you feeling about the changes we made?
I was quite happy, to be honest. I had assumed that Weaver was going to come in and play central midfield alongside Baleba, and on that basis, I think I said in our chat, it was a little bit of kind of solidity to central midfield with those two. So that's what I assumed it was. And then Pedro out wide, I was less enthusiastic about that because we've seen him play out of position a few times, and we've seen the drop off in effectiveness when that happens. So I was a bit mixed about that. But yeah, Weaver I was happy to see him come in, and then the rest kind of picked itself given who's available.
Yeah. So you had Van Hecker obviously come back in as well. We'll talk about what happened at the end of the match with him as well. But again, just a level of with the number of people coming in, and like you said, I think the key word was solidity, right? Let's just try and just be as solid as we can and be hard to break down. Wasn't the case, but I think Vifa was always a good shout. I like Vifa. I think there's some mixed opinions about him and what he brings, but I do think he's solid. And from a teamship perspective, I thought that was fine. I agree with you on the Pedro situation. I think him being in a wider position does make him less effective. It makes him less of a goal threat. He's more of a creator in that role than he is a finisher, and we know that he's a good finisher. So you're kind of sacrificing something by having him out there. Good to see Matoma back on the bench. You had both Adingra and Matoma on the bench, both natural left wingers, and instead we've gone for Pedro on that left wing. So a conversation point, sure, especially when it comes to him only playing 60 minutes. But at the same time, it was a choice, really. And I can't say that it made any sort of influence on the game. And when we did start, you get to like 9 minutes for the first goal to come out. I watched this in a pub with a bunch of other Brighton fans, which was really fun. But it felt, I think one of the comments was, it felt like a scrimmage. Like the game sort of felt like two teams with not a lot to play for, even though they have something to play for. And it seems really open. It seems really not gung-ho, but it just seemed a bit careless, right? And I think that's where the first goal came in with Brian and Buemo, just such an easy chance that came through to him. But the defending was awful, and it just felt like we just weren't there. But the first 10 minutes, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, but it just felt like nobody really wanted it.
Yeah, we've had, and obviously we'll get into what happened in the early part of the second half, but it feels like we're in a bit of a pattern of conceding early goals in both halves. And I feel like we went through that with latter-day De Zerbi as well. I feel like this is history repeating itself. And I don't know what it is, whether you say it's a lack of concentration or someone not getting hold of the ball. But when you look at it, I mean, you had Van Hecker and Dunk. So in theory, that's our, we can get into Dunk, but in theory, that's our kind of best centre-back pairing of the last year and a half, if you take it as a whole chunk of time. So it's not like we're lacking any experience. So it's an odd one, isn't it? That actually you've got the people on the pitch who you'd think would be the ones who are able to get everybody start, and Welbeck as well. So you've got all the experienced players on the pitch at the beginning who you think would be able to kind of marshal it through. But it's a double Achilles heel, because we know that we're not that great at the beginning of the game, and we're also really vulnerable to a quick through ball. It's like it's kind of double kryptonite, isn't it? And obviously Mbeumo's, is having a great season. I think he's up to 18 Premier League goals or something, which is, it's a great, it's a remarkable season. So yeah, very, very frustrating. Very, very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken about this before as well, and I've alluded to it on previous episodes too. It's like, I feel like with this Hursley team, and maybe even, like you said, the latter De Zerbi teams, is that you kind of have to get through the first 15, 20 minutes for this side to settle in and for this side to really gain composure or maybe just a bit of confidence in what they're doing. It always feels like we kind of have to amble our way through the first 10 minutes to really find our feet and then get started. And yesterday was just a real epitome of that, and how I feel about how we start periods of games, right? Because I think you said the start of the second half as well, exactly the same thing happened. Is that it just feels like we're very, very slow to get out the gate and very slow to really have our impact and really push what we want to do on the other team. And like I said, yesterday was just a real good example of that, both with the first 10 minutes of the first half and Mbeumo getting a second within 3 minutes of the second half starting. Just doesn't suit us in the way that we want to manage games as well, right? So you've got a philosophy here that you impose yourself on the opponent and you create chances, and essentially you get a goal and then you control the game from there, because all of a sudden that team becomes a reactive team than a proactive team. You've seen that this team is very much better against bigger teams, and that's because they want to play their own game, and us being able to force a reaction on them and then force them to come out and be who they don't want to be is where we gain our advantage. So as soon as you go 1-0 down with this team, I feel like we're relatively ineffective. I think that's borderline harsh given the amount of points we've won from coming behind this year. I think that's probably a difference between Hursley and other managers prior, but it just doesn't set up well for the rest of the team, the rest of the game, and for the rest of the first half as well. It felt like we just weren't doing enough, and it felt like it really did feel like two teams that just didn't want it. And I think I summed up the first half just in general, and I'm just going really fast through this. Just felt like two teams that just wanted to go home, just wanted to get this over and done with and head home.
It's bizarre, isn't it, considering that we're both, even still now with Chelsea beating Fulham, we're basically, both teams are still within a win of finishing 8th, which I agree with you. It did feel like that. It felt like a final day of the season game for two teams who are in mid-table with nothing to play for, which is really bizarre.
Yeah,
but I'm with you. I mean, I think you're exactly right. Conceding an early goal is our nightmare, because then the team like Brentford can kind of just sit there, let us have the ball, and we had that patch where obviously we won 6 in a row and we looked really dynamic and we were able to unpick defenses and score goals. But the last few games, it's been the same pattern, as we've seen previous as well. You can sit there, allow us to have the ball for large chunks of time, wait for us to either give it away or not do anything with it, and then we're immediately vulnerable to a counter-attack. It felt like I was nervous that entire first half, even when we had the ball in the final third, because we've seen it time and time again.
With they'll huff and puff and nothing happens, right? And so just reeling off some stats here, like 0 big chances, 4 corners, 7 shots to their 4. doesn't really paint a good enough picture as what it happened. And it's a very even first half, right? I'd like to say that. I think obviously I agree with you. It's very nerve-wracking being in their final third, knowing that the chances of us creating something legitimate is quite low, and then being susceptible to a counter attack. It just leaves for nervy viewing anyway. And that's again how I would sum up the first half. Really, was just ineffective. And again, jumping all the way to the end of the first half, we get bailed out by Danny Welbeck, by just being Danny Welbeck in the right place at the right time and just being a strong target forward. And he bails us out of that first half.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the Palace game, isn't it? Similar, not much happening, huff and puff. We need a goal. Who do you look to? Danny Welbeck. And it felt like, I'm never going to say it's undeserved, because that feels too harsh. But you know what I mean? It's slightly against probably the overall balance of play. I know we had a lot of the ball, but kind of chance creation wise, it feels like, given how the game started, I'd say it to you in this way: like, if after 15 minutes of the game you were offered 1-1 at half time, you'd have bitten everybody's hand off for it, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's probably the best way to sum it up.
And I think that's why I said it the way I said it. Was I feel like ultimately we were bailed out because I was I was accepting of the fact that we just weren't good enough in that first half, and arguably we deserved to be 1-0 down because you just don't create the chances and you aren't able to break a low block down, which is essentially what Brentford are doing. And I mean zero disrespect to that, right? You're 1-0 up, you need points, like you need to get on the board. They're also on a terrible run of form, right? So regardless of where they are now on 43 points, but 40 at the time, is that they hadn't won at home for months. So, if you do go and get that first goal, you're absolutely within your rights to go and low block and see that at least that first half out and just try and manage the game. Completely understand it. So that's why I said we were lucky to go in at 1-1, because I felt like we just weren't and hadn't been good enough up until that point. But just Welbeck does what Welbeck does. Like, again, with the crosses and with being able to get on the end of a cross, we don't have anyone better, to be completely fair. And him being able to be in the right place at the right time, given his experience, you then go into the half at 1-1 and you go, right, that's a really good way to end the half, right? Like then this is where I end up painting a horrible picture and a narrative, because you go in 1-1, you just scored in 48 minutes, right? You go in, that team talk should be the easiest team talk you need to give, right? You go, right, you got lucky there. Let's reset. Let's go out and swing, and really go for it. Whilst the Brentford dressing room would be, we don't deserve that. That's really harsh. I don't know what we're going to do here. So the surprise when it hits 48 minutes and you come out and we're just slow out of the tracks again.
I say we did reset. We just reset back to how it was before.
It was a hard reset. Essentially, someone just turned you off and you had to wait to turn back on again. I know.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where some frustration is going to lie within the social media channels that you follow, or just within the fan base itself, is that should have been such an easy talk, or that should have been such an easy thing to go in at half time and go, right, now we have a chance. We haven't been playing well, but we got it. And now we need to kick on and we need to win this game. And you mess it up within 3 minutes, just because you're just slow out of the tracks again and slow to respond. No changes at half time. I think we've gone through that fairly quickly, but I think ineffective was the word we used. And then you get onto the second half, which is a lot more to talk about. But within 3 minutes again, when Wermo gets his second goal, through bad defending. And I think there's an element of fortune to it. I think it comes off the defender and just takes it away from Verbruggen. I'm not blaming the goalkeeper, but just bad defending and not being able to get out your own box and able to pass that ball and really get out. It was a really bad goal to concede at the worst conceivable time.
Yeah, it really was. It's kind of back to Lewis Dunk. Someone said it earlier. It's that first couple of seasons in the Premier League where Dunk and Duffy were just like throwing themselves in the way of shots, and we were seemingly getting a lot of goals, either own goals or big deflections. And it's kind of like, it's slightly desperate defending, isn't it? And when you're getting to that stage of having to be very desperate, you've kind of done something wrong to put yourself in the position where you're
And we
having to,
have. Yeah.
having to try and dig ourselves out. And obviously, Dunk has lost a little bit of pace, both in terms of actual speed and also reaction time in those 5 or 6 years. So
Yeah.
what's going to happen? It's defensive. Yeah, it's just. I say it comes back to, this looks like a loss, either a loss of concentration or just a lack of organisation. It's got to be one of the two, because we've seen games recently where Van Hecke and Webster were looking supremely organised, supremely confident.
Surprisingly so.
Exactly. So then, in the space of 3 weeks, 4 weeks, to have gone back almost to kind of the lowest points of the season before Christmas. That's the thing I can't get my head around, is what you would normally expect to see is, you have that tough start, we kind of ride it out, we find a way of getting through it, which actually was Adam Webster, as you say, which is a bit of a surprise. I know he's then gone back, he's injured again, but still it seems it's the kind of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back has happened a few times over the course of the season now. And I find that that's the more difficult thing, is that we're not, I know it's not always a linear progression, but it does seem like we're kind of making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, and you're almost reverting to a type, and that type isn't good. Oh yeah, we'll take a couple of minutes here, because I think it's important, because just while we're on the subject, is that throughout this entire season, I've asked myself and many other people, are we a good team or are we not a good team, right? And I think the reason I say this is because of consistency, right? You just alluded to it, is that you have these amazing purple patches, but then you have these really horrible periods of games where you not only lose, but lose pretty comprehensively, or you're just not playing well. So whilst consistency is important, right? That wins you championships, that wins you everything, right? If you're consistently good, then you're great. If you're consistently bad, you get your just desserts, right? Consistency drives where you're probably going to finish. The level of peaks and troughs in this season is a lot higher and a lot lower than it has been for any season that I've seen in prior, right? I would say the last 4 or 5, because when we're bad consistently. When we're good consistently. You have a 6-run winning streak where you are playing people off the park. You are scoring goals for fun. You are conceding next to no goals, right? There's a period where you score 14 and concede 3. You've got Webster and Van Hecke playing out their skin. You've got a really good team dynamic. And then you go on this run of now 4 or 5 games without a win. You've got 1 draw and 4 losses, including the FA Cup. And all of a sudden you're like, well, we're not even playing well to begin with. So like, if you are playing well and losing, that's different to not playing well and then still losing and just continuing to be bad, right? Just bad. So like, from being world beaters to we might make Europe here, to now 5 games later saying we're lucky if we finish 12th at this point. Like, those highs and those lows are so severe that I think that's where the trepidation comes from. So that I was making a point. There was no counter argument there. There's no question around it, but it was more of an observation that when we're bad, we're really bad. And you go up against a Brentford team that hasn't won at home in months. And obviously we'll get onto the red card, right? But like, even prior to the red card, you're 2-1, 3-1 down, and all of a sudden there's no hope. And I struggle to see how this team can be so good and so bad in such a short period of time.
It's really, I feel really unsettled by it, because I kind of don't know where I stand. And you've alluded to it, but you end up feeling quite schizophrenic about it, because you can quite happily have a weekend where you're like, okay, we've cracked it. Like, we're good to watch. We're getting the results that we deserve. We're scoring the goals that our XG would suggest that we should be scoring. All's good. And then within a couple of weeks, it's like, no, we are now dreadful again. And it's not good for mental regime. But I mean, to bring it back to stats as well, I mean, I think, we alluded to to Webster and Van Hecke being the kind of the defensive partnership in that excellent run. I mean, it's a stat you might have seen it. I just looked it up today, but Lewis Dunk has started 13 of our last 25 Premier League games. And in those 13 games, we've got 8 points. In the 12 games that he's not started, we've got 24. And that's like, I don't really like boiling it down to like an individual stat and an individual player. But it's such a stark one, given the timings of it, that it's a really uncomfortable. And obviously it's Lewis Dunk as well, and it's like that adds a certain layer of like, I don't want to throw him under the bus. But
No,
the stats are like, but do you know what I mean? But when it's like you've won 3 times as many points in the same number of games when he's played and not played, it feels like something that can't really be ignored.
And because it's statistical, I think that's where people are also influenced by it. Is that you can statistically prove that this is a gap, or maybe somewhere where we're struggling. I think I said the last time I was on here just around Dunk leading by example and being a captain that leads by high performance and just really good attributes that allow him to have a good game all of the time, right? Like there wasn't that long ago where Dunk was consistently the highest rated player that we would have. And I do think that he is a captain, like I said, that leads by example. And at the moment, he's not. And there's not going to be a witch hunt on here. There's not going to be like some serious heavy metal observations going on. But statistically, you're right, is that Dunk is not having a good time right now. And it is translating to the amount of points that we're getting, or maybe the performances that we're going through. There are other factors. There are other symptoms, right? I really think that Jorginho Ruta is a huge miss. I think what he brings to this team is a lot more than maybe stats suggest. And I think he was having a really good season.
Yeah, I mean, he's the engine. He is basically the engine behind
right.
It. And like you say, it doesn't show up in stats.
No,
but you watch any game and you go, he is. And we talked about it before. It's his energy, and so many times when he is the person that triggers the press. So many times. Yeah. So, like I say, I'm totally with you. He is a big miss, and Baleba has gone, by his high standards, has gone off the boil for the last few games. And to me, it just seems like it leaves a big gap in between defense and midfield that we're just getting murdered in time and time again.
Yeah. And this is, I don't know anyone that is having good games right now. And I think that might lead to someone that does put in very good performances on a very regular basis in João Pedro. What do you think of the red card?
I think it's harsh. I think it's a harsh red, but he's starting to get a little bit of a reputation for this, I think, now. Because he's had a red card recently, relatively recently, I think. And he's also had that, I forget the game, but he had where he basically swung an elbow at someone.
And that
got away. Basically, got away with it.
Worse than yesterday.
Yeah. So he's beginning to I wonder whether that's starting to influence, because he's had three kind of incidences in not a very long period of time. So I do wonder whether it's starting to become a bit of a thing that referees look out for, because they know he's got this potential to have a bit of a red mist. I don't know also whether it's like he was being played in a position that he doesn't like playing in, and he's ineffectual from it, and whether it's just a frustration. But yeah, I think it is, as an incident, I think it's a harsh red card. But I think you can sort of understand in the context of how he's been at various points in the season. I can sort of understand why the referee might have thought there was more in it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think obviously no contact, but I think it is silly. I don't think I'm going to give him maybe as much grace as other people would. I think for someone that has wore the captain's armband, for someone that leads by example, is a very vocal dressing room leader. For him to do that at 3-1 down is silly. I don't think he will, and this is the thing, he'll look back on that and he'll go, that's a mistake, right? I think you've given the ref a decision to make on 61 minutes with 3-1 down. You conceded 3 minutes ago. You are annoyed. You might be pissed off. You might be very unhappy with the way that this game is going, in a position where you're not particularly effective. He wants to be playing up front. He wants to be involved in the penalty box. He wants to be doing that sort of stuff. But still, right? Like, this is someone that has captained us and other teams in the past. This is someone that is part of the Brazil national team. I don't care how annoyed you are. If you give the referee a decision to make, it isn't going to go your way sometimes. So for me, is it soft? Could it have gone another way? Sure. But you've given the ref a decision to make, and we know how bad the refs are. It's silly, I do think. And you've left your team with an insurmountable task, right? Like, that's very much, again, watching it live as it happens, you go, right, that's it then. Like, you may as well just sit down and watch the rest of it play out.
You then basically, because Welbeck's on a yellow card,
right?
It then necessitates Hertz effectively taking Welbeck off, because it's like, if he gets sent off, Reuter's already out injured. So then we're going into West Ham at home with no viable options for starting up front.
Yeah. And we missed the third goal there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything about the third goal. We spoke about the second one. We spoke about the second one again. Just, we can't get out of our own box. We're the creators of our own demise, basically, in just self-capitulating with a really slow start and just bad defending. But I don't know if you want to cover the third one before I move on.
I mean, it's a similar. I mean, again, it's another slightly, I don't want to say harsh, but it's another kind of deflection, isn't it? And Verbruggen's not. He's not in a stellar moment himself either. It kind of just I think it's very similar to the second goal, in that it kind of sums up in a little microcosm. It sums up a lot of our defensive issues, doesn't it? It tends to be when we have one bit of bad luck in defense. It doesn't tend to be the only thing. It tends to be like a bit of a domino thing. So we'll get an unlucky deflection, and then you also have Bart not necessarily top of his game.
No,
kind of building on top of it.
Yeah, and to be fair, no one's on top of their game right now. So there's been, again, discussions had around Verbruggen and what his future might be. No one is full of confidence right now, and I think that's the issue. I think as a goalkeeper, they are highlighted quite extravagantly, because a mistake that a goalkeeper makes is so much more high profile than if you miss a ball in the center of midfield. So
he's now basically top of the. It depends if that's going to go down as a mistake, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If it does, he'll be top of I think he'll be joint top of the league that you don't want to be top of as a goalkeeper.
But yeah, and I don't like that stat, because
there's no context to it, is there?
Because if you've got no one to pass to, if you've
been left out, that's it. You're just done.
So you could leave your goalkeeper hung out to dry, right? I will say Brentford's press yesterday, when they weren't in the low block, was very good. Like, I thought they pressed us really well. I thought we really didn't have enough time to do anything. And it was one of the better presses that I've seen against us, and we did struggle against it. Back to the Verbruggen thing, again, is it a goalkeeper error if he's got absolutely no one to pass to, or it's a really risky pass because of the position of the people that you need to be passing to? So for me, you can throw that stat about if you like. I'm not a big believer in it, because I think there's like you said, there's context to be had with it, and there's other factors that designate what a mistake is and isn't. But that's life, right? So I think no one is playing great at the moment. I think we can attest to that. João Pedro throws an elbow, gets sent off for it, and then you have, what is it, Solly March coming on for Minte. I think O'Reilly came off as well. Who was it? Sorry, just looking it up. Matoma on for O'Reilly, right? So that's where I was going with this conversation. two very quick changes, two attacking changes, right? Which insinuates, right, we kind of have to go for this at this point. You're 3-1 down. You're a man down as well. Welbeck doesn't come off, even though he's on a yellow, which, you know, I think you still need that attacking threat. And then the game sort of plays out as it plays out. I think there's you try and hit them on the counter and you try and create things. I thought we did okay in the grand scheme of things. I thought we weren't that bad. Typically when you see 11 against 10, you're sort of under the cosh a lot of the time, and there were periods of time where we were, but ultimately there was still that ethos or at least that ability to get forward and actually create something. And there were periods in that second half where we did create stuff. The XG doesn't say that at all, but like we had more possession than I thought we did or thought we would have.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Solly March just looks like a player that if he was fully fit all season and he could play 90 minutes, like whenever we've seen him in these brief appearances, he's looked consistently our most dangerous player almost immediately.
Yeah, yeah, and he deserves that. And I think it's really nice to see that he can play to that level, like not with the duration yet, because he had a very serious injury. He had over a year off, right? You remember that. We've seen people with these ACL injuries just not come back at all. So for him to come back and have an impact in the Premier League and work to the level that he's working at, despite only being in substitute appearances right now, is always really nice to see. And I agree with you, is that he is a very good player defensively and offensively. And I think he brings a lot to the table. I can't wait to see him start playing 60, 70 minutes, because I feel like he will be effective and he will bring something else that we don't currently have.
Agreed. He did say in his post-match interview he doesn't know when he's going to be able to start games,
which is bad.
Hopefully next season. I mean, he needs a full pre-season.
He does, yeah.
But yeah, he was very effective coming off the bench, and let's say I think we did the absolute best that we could in that situation. With being a man down, 2 goals down is very difficult. And you know, there have been games where, probably Forest most notably, there've been games where it felt like that situation could unravel for us very quickly, and it didn't. And it feels like like a small crumb of comfort, right? But it did. We didn't give up.
Yeah. If anyone wants to paint us as a negative podcast, you can listen to this little clipped back.
That's it.
You here. So
that is it.
I agree. I thought this could be another Forest, because I thought you have to go for this, right? And I think that's Hursley's mentality is, if you, and at this point in the season, right, if you lose 7-1 instead of 4-2, it's the same result, barring a couple of goals conceded. Or we can talk about goal difference if we like, but our goal difference is already crap. So like we're on 0. So like I think that was always the mentality. It was for Forest, and it went one way, and we didn't change the philosophy, or at least our mentality here. We did get a goal back, right? So, and then it's a good finish by Matoma as well. I think it's again against the run of play, and it kind of has to be when you're a man down, but the ability to go and then score whilst you're a man down, and then feel like you can actually go and get another, was the main positive I took out of yesterday. Was the ability to react to the situation in a rather positive manner. Obviously, it was worth absolutely zilch, but from my side, being able to be a man down for half an hour and influence the game, try and score and do score, and then go and look for an equalizer. Ultimately, it wasn't to be, but I liked that.
Yeah, definitely. I say, in comparison to other games we've had where it's gone the other way, that does show the team learning from that previous situation. Whether it's just being slightly more reserved and not necessarily committing absolutely everything. You wait for the right moment to go for it, not just gung ho out the window. I think we did really well considering. And actually, there's another universe not that far away where that game finishes 3-3.
Or 6-2.
Yeah, 6-2, exactly.
and this is, we can come on to this and we'll finish and wrap the game up, but it was just one of those, and I think we're on that current run as well. They do get a fourth in injury time, right? So like that's
from a set piece, obviously.
Our susceptibility at defending set pieces is incredible in a bad way. But they eventually get the fourth goal, and it's sort of the game over, and you go, right, fine. And then just to touch on that before we go to full time, tough clash of heads right at the end as well, which delayed the game a good 10 minutes or so. It looks like Jan-Paul van Hekke is discharged from hospital and stuff, so it looks like he's at least okay. But what that means for any sort of future games coming up, etc., I would fully expect to either see Baleba back at centre back or Cashin come in. Make of that what you will. But good to see that he's okay at the very least, because it looked rough and like it looked really bad. So just when you get him back, it looks like he's going to have another period on the sidelines. And that comes to, I guess, the summation of how I feel right now is that the injury crisis, once again this year, has stopped us from achieving maybe what we could have achieved. There's a lot of people out right now. I missed out Joel Veltman earlier, and I think he is also integral to this team. And I'm glad that he's staying another year. We've missed his guile and his ability to shithouse, essentially, and manage games from a right back scenario. It kind of feels like the season's over, doesn't it, for me? Despite Chelsea winning today, right? I think Adam said in the chat that kind of saves grace a little bit, because you have this battle for 8th place that's still very much on. But as soon as the full-time whistle hit yesterday, I kind of said game over.
Yeah, it does feel like that, doesn't it? It's petering out slightly, and it's, I don't know. I don't really want to give this too much airtime, but I don't know whether it's worth touching on the anti-Hurtzler chants that were heard from the away end, because it feels like something that is worth mentioning. I'm not coming down on either side of the fence about it, but the way I would describe it, and I had this discussion with someone this morning actually, to me it kind of feels more significant that you got that sort of chant in a game where there's a really small allocation, and it's basically our fans who've got the highest number of loyalty points, who go to the most amount of games. This isn't a game where you've got an enormous number of day trippers, if you want to call it that. These are the people who go week in, week out. I know it's only a small minority, right? I'm not suggesting this is the entire away end, right? But the fact that you got this kind of pocket of it from people who've been there week in, week out, feels like something we can't really ignore. I'm not suggesting that it's massive either, but I feel like it's worthy of discussion.
I think it is, and I think I will put you on the spot as well, if you don't mind, because I think you have been critical of Hurtzler across this season, and safe to say that you would have some choice words about Hurtzler and what he's currently done this season, right? For me, there are pros and cons to this season in its entirety, right? There are glimpses of this team that can be a very, very good team, right? When you are playing well, you can beat anyone. And it feels like you can just go ahead and just ruin teams on a weekly basis. It's that consistency that's the problem, and we've already addressed that. But there's also that part in my brain that doesn't know if this is a good team or not. I think
really bizarre. I know exactly what I'm going to say. I don't mind being put on the spot like that. But the way I find, I have a real split as well in my brain, which is we're 10th in the Premier League, right? So I cannot get my head, and given, we can trot out the stereotypical given where we come from, Phoenix from the ashes, all of that stuff. In the context of that, it feels I'm not going to get down the path of being genuinely disappointed that we're 10th in the Premier League, because that would just be that would be levels of entitlement that are just off the scale, right? But there is a nuance to it as well, which is like, you look at the thing, you go, yeah, we're 10th, brilliant, great, we've got a new manager. He's come to a different country, he's come to a different division. his age is actually not relevant for this, so I'm not going to leave that out. But it's a new manager, new division, new country. We've had upheaval. Gross has left. Lallana's left. Arguably, Gilmore's gone. Arguably, we didn't replace enough of that experience. But it kind of feels like, with Spurs and Man United having their seasons that they have, it kind of feels like a bit of a missed opportunity if we don't get 8th, just because of what's happened before. And my thing about Hertha is, and it's going to sound really bizarre when I say it this way, and it's completely like, it's no stats behind it. It is so arbitrary and so subjective. But I just don't enjoy. Like, I found for large parts of the season, I don't enjoy this iteration of Brighton. I don't enjoy watching us for a lot, and that's not every game. But like, if I look at it as a whole, and I don't know whether it's the inconsistency we've talked about that makes it really unsettling. I don't know what it is. That's to say, it's really like, it's so arbitrary, and I can't put a. This sounds like I'm kind of sitting on the fence about it, but I genuinely can't. Like, I can't put my finger on it. But like, it's probably the first time. I reckon the last time that I felt like this was probably Hippier, that Hippier season. And I'm not putting them on the same level, but that's the last time that I didn't consistently enjoy watching Brighton. And the way it manifests itself is, I'm now like, games used to be like, I would plan my Saturdays around, you'd plan match day around when Brighton's on. I don't this season. I watch most of the games, like 90% of the games I'll still watch.
Yeah.
But like, if I can't watch a game this year, I know this is all really like, there's no stats behind it. It's really subjective, but I'm not enjoying this iteration of it. And it might be the injuries, it might be the stop-start nature of it. I don't know.
Because I think it's important, right? And I think you probably are far from the only one, because when you think about statistics, when you think about where this team is and maybe where we expected this team to be, you can go and watch back our pre-season expectations, and we went through what would constitute as a good season for us, right? With a new manager, with a suite of new players, with experienced players going out. I'm pretty sure all of us said within the range of 8th to 12th or even 13th.
Yeah.
And I do remember I said 11th or 12th, and I said that would be a good season, right? You got a lot of young players, a new manager, a lot of good teams in this league. And I think this is where I'm going on to my second point, is that comparison is the thief of joy a little bit here, because I think you've got an Aston Villa team with a Europa League winning manager at the helm and some incredible players that they've been able to bring in because of their Champions League run. You were able to bring in people like Rashford, Marcus Asensio, like those sort of players. And you go and you compare yourself to Aston Villa, and I don't think that's fair. I think, the ability of them to do it again this season just shows you how good they are. I also feel we're in the same boat as Fulham and Bournemouth, where they're also going to feel exactly the same way that we're going to feel, that this is a missed opportunity with larger teams not doing as well this year. The fact remains is that there's just really good teams this year. I think, Liverpool essentially have run away with it, but you've got your Forest, your Villas, your Newcastles who really come into it now. Newcastle have, in my eyes, the best striker in the world playing for them right now. So that's hard when you've got João Pedro getting red cards and Ruta out for the season, right? Like,
and we've beaten them. We've beaten them twice away from home as well,
right? So we've done our bit. So and so this is when you've got your Forest and your Newcastles and your Villas that are smashing it, through the lack of a better term, it does kind of suck, because you go, well, why can't that be us, or why can't we do that? And there are certain instances where injuries are a problem or consistency is a problem. Which brings me on to the subjective nature of, are we a good team to watch? Do I enjoy watching us play? And I think there's probably more people in that boat than we probably think, right? And I include you in that, right? It's just effectively, I don't like watching, I don't like watching this as much as I used to watch it, or as last year, where last year was very similar. We petered out towards the end of the year. But I think it is important conversation, because if you do have this vocal minority or the loyalists that were in that away end and they're voicing their displeasure around this, it can't be because of the league position finish, because we're still on track to be a top 10 Premier League team.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that should have been the expectation, which is why I find it so interesting that it's like, well, I'm not enjoying it because I don't like this version of how we're playing. So it then becomes, how am I going to say this without, I like where we're finishing from a points position and from a target perspective and from a tangible points perspective. I'm happy. I just don't like how we've got there. And that's a bigger issue, right? Because if you finished, say, for example, this is my last question to you before we move on. If we were 5th and playing the same way that we're playing, would you feel any different?
Oh, it's a really good question. Clearly not as much, but there would still be a lingering, there'd kind of be a lingering thing about it. It's really difficult. It's really, really difficult. And it's not something that, it can come. I'd imagine there's people listening to it going, you just sound really entitled. Like, you think we should be like playing teams off the park and we should be like in the top 6. It's genuinely not that. Like, I would be, it's not the league, like, it's not even the league position.
Right.
Like, it doesn't really come into it.
I think that's what I'm alluding to. It's just
like and I appreciate it sounds mental to people who go, well, you're not really expressing what you mean. It's because it's quite difficult to express it. But yeah, it's a slightly random kind of thing. Yeah. And I think part of it is, I do know where part of it comes from. And part of it comes from a belief, a semi-belief that I reckon that kind of season we finished 6th, all the European games that followed. I think I've said this on the pod before. Part of me feels like that will be the apex.
Yeah.
Not to be defeatist, but it feels like that may end up being like
a crowning moment.
A crowning moment.
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult. Like, we're still quite close to when that happened. So I feel like I'm in like a little hangover.
Well, that was
from that.
That was last season.
Yeah. So I feel like obviously the season, so the last season and a half before that, I feel like I'm in a little hangover from that. So I think I'm kind of writing it off partly from that.
Yeah.
In terms of, I'll flip a question around to you as well, which is, and I was thinking about this earlier today, because I was thinking, well, what can Hertzler do with the players that we have available right now in terms of who's not suspended and who's fit to play? What can he do to make this team function better? And if I said, like, there's an argument you can make where he goes to a kind of Nottingham Forest low block counter-attacking style, which on paper you'd go, well, that's the opposite. Like, that's obviously not how Tony Bloom wants us to play. That's not how that's not the system that's been developed for the last 5 or 6 years. But if you look at it, who's available today, you go, well, Lewis Dunk, if he's going to play games, would look a lot more comfortable in a low block system because I still feel like he'd do a job there. Like, as a pure defender, as it were. I feel like he'd do a job there. You've then got Baleba, Ayari, Gomez, who are all very good at moving the ball forward quickly. And then we've got genuine pace on both flanks. So it feels like you could make an argument for playing that way, but I don't know whether that would actually make a difference to us, or whether that actually whether that kind of does the opposite, which is then you become even further away from like an enjoyable way of playing. I don't know. It feels like he's not necessarily setting things up for the best for like what we actually have available.
Right. Yeah. I also think I asked you an unfair question, because I think it all is around consistency at the same time. Is if you were 5th and you were playing this style or philosophy of football, you would absolutely be more consistent, and therefore it would be more enjoyable to watch, and therefore the subjective nature of what you're watching then becomes easier. And so I think, to answer my own question that I asked you, it kind of is a double-edged sword, because if you were more consistent, you would finish fifth, and then all of a sudden everything is nicer to watch and everything is more important. But then what does Herzler need to do, right? And how can he get the best out of this team? Ultimately, I don't know. I don't really understand. I think first and foremost, he needs a full suite of players to choose from. The players that he would have had a hand in bringing in the summer, and people that he would have brought in January, or people that he would let go in January because he wasn't using them, the Fergusons, the Encisos of the world. So how does he get the best out of these players? I have no idea. And I think that might be where some of the frustration is that there is no reason why this team is so good at one point and then so bad at another point. And I think that's where your subjectivity around how enjoyable this is to watch is, because I don't know which Brighton team's turning up. So I
say it's so
and I can't get excited because I don't know who's going to turn up. Right? You have, because it could be the same 11 and it could be the same squad and it could be the same people, and they could go and smash a team 3 or 4-0 and everything's great, but at the same time that team could lose 7-0. So I think that's where the eye test and where maybe that enjoyment is coming from, because there's an apprehension of what team is going to show up. I don't know how you fix that. I don't really understand. Do you think it's a tactics thing, or do you think it's a mentality thing?
I mean, the injuries have clearly had a really big say, because you look at that period after Forest where we won 6 in a row, or whatever it was. He was able to pick a very settled team in terms of who was available at that point, right? He didn't really have to tinker much in that. We've lost, we've basically not had Kadioglu since November, feels like October, November. James Milner since basically the start of the season, barring Everton and a couple of other games. So you've got 2 very experienced players.
You had Veltman in there as well, because exactly. I think he's so important.
It's very, very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult. But I think it becomes. I don't want to get I know the kind of the injury situation is the card that a lot of people will immediately play, and I feel like it needs to be somewhere a bit more in the middle. Like, it is a reason, but it is not the reason. I feel like it needs to be given its weight in terms of the cause of inconsistencies, but you've still got a big squad, right? You've got a big squad of Premier League quality players.
This team is still going to finish in the top 10.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the thing. It's a really difficult. It comes down to, and I've had this argument with people. It comes down to where you think the team could have finished, not versus where they actually are.
Yeah. And I think I spoke about the highs and the lows of this season and how high those highs are, is that you were in 4th, 5th position and you go, oh crap, this is a real thing that could possibly happen. And the media pile on and they go, well, this is a race for Europe. Let's get Brighton involved in that conversation. And then you go on this run here where you've lost 4 and drew 1 against Leicester City, who again hadn't scored in ages. And
we've given them 30% of their goals under Van Nistelrooy.
And then you go to Brentford, who haven't won at home since God knows how long. And the whole it just feels like it really has petered out a little bit.
But I'm gonna be slightly weird, probably weird given what I've just said. And I was like, I haven't written us off finishing 8th.
Me neither, right? I think the Chelsea result today, with a very ironic that it's we're celebrating a Chelsea win, but it leaves us, Bournemouth and Fulham on 48. And
so we were the same as we are. Yes, basically we're no worse off than we were before the game started yesterday.
Which is again a good and a bad, because you go, right, this league is ridiculous and everyone is either crap or good. And you go, I don't know who's going to beat who. But at the same time, if you win yesterday, you're on 51 points. Everyone else has dropped points. It feels like a momentous occasion. And this podcast is very, very different. So I think that just shows you the fine margins that we're currently at. Before I go on to the rest of the season, one more question. Does Herzler stay? Do you what? I'm not gonna say a horrible question like that. Would you like him in charge for next season?
I don't know.
Also a valid answer.
It's really difficult because, again, it depends, because you've seen glimpses of what he can do and how the team has played.
And it's some of the
season, right?
Some of the best football I've seen us play.
That's the thing. That's the thing. But the fairest thing would the fairest answer could also be partly the most disruptive, which is you go, yeah, he deserves another crack next year. But let's say we finish this season, it probably tails off, right? Not saying we lose every other game, but it tails off in a kind of similar way to we are now. If you start next season, whatever happens in the transfer window, and you start next season with the same kind of pattern, the question then becomes, well, how long do you leave it? Does that then disrupt the season because you've missed, you've had a whole pre-season? Do you know what I mean? Like the fairest thing to him could end up being, if it was to continue in the same vein,
right,
could end up being very disruptive. So I don't know. It's similar. Like you can make very reasoned arguments on both sides of it, I think. Fair. Purely me, like based on how I've enjoyed or not enjoyed the football this year, I would probably change it in the summer, being completely honest.
And I guess put it down to just not a good fit.
Yeah. Not every gamble. It's a gamble. We all knew it was going to be a gamble. Virtually every managerial appointment's a gamble. And I say, but if he's still here next season, I'm not going to be, not going to be annoyed about it. I'm kind of, I'm not on the fence about it, but I can see the arguments from both sides of it.
Do you just see this as a waste of a season then?
That was what I was going to ask. No, because it sort of depends what you learn from it. We've seen a few questions come up. I think what we've learned from this season is that we probably knew it before the season started that we need defensive reinforcements. Whoever the manager next season is, we need defensive reinforcements.
And we saw that in the summer. We saw that in January, right? There was no hidden fact that we were looking for a centre back. We were linked with Boscagli, which is called down. We were linked to Tosin, who was at Chelsea and never really, came to fruition. So obviously Cashin came in. He's not had a good start, right? Let's be honest, but you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was thrown to the wolves in the first game, like poor guy. So there was no real doubt that we want a centre back, and I think we'll continue to do that. When it comes back to Hürzeler, for me, I think this was always going to be a project. I feel like this wasn't going to be, you need to come in and you need to make Europe this year. Otherwise, it's a failed year. I don't think that's how we would be operating or would like to operate. So for me, I don't think it's really a question for me. I would like to see him in charge next year with a full suite of players, with the players that are fresh from injury, having Veltman, Karioglu, Ruta, having an extra defender come in, like being able to have Belieber and Weaver consistently along with Hinshelwood. I think O'Reilly's still got a point to prove. I am going back on injuries are not the only problem, but they've probably influenced other problems or at least exacerbated other problems that we've had. And I think that's probably the key driving factor. But we got a couple more bits to do before we close. We're at the sort of hour mark, right? I'm going to ask you to pick a man of the match from yesterday.
Well, from an Albion point of view, it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. Because there were, like we said earlier, no one's particularly top of their game. But what you had pockets of the game where individuals had probably little spells where they were on top. Like I say, I think beyond the first 5-10 minutes, I thought Weaver was excellent considering he played he's not played that much football. I thought he was excellent.
Weeper's my man of the match. So
okay,
just as an FYI.
Yeah, I think that's probably him.
I thought he was excellent yesterday. I think in a team that is devoid of any confidence and was really up against the cosh, I thought he was very good. Again, he's not a game-changing player, right? I'm not going to talk about Weefer and go, he had an exceptional game because he scored a hat-trick and saved 2 off the line, right? Like, that's not who Weefer is. What he does is he gives you an element of control. He gives you defensive solidity to an extent, and yesterday was not a good example, but I thought he was the best of a bad bunch yesterday, and I think it's probably him for me.
Yeah, and I think Welbeck's in the conversation as we talked about because Welbeck does what Welbeck does. I mean, and then you have little pockets. So like March came on and was excellent, albeit for a short period of time. Matoma the same. So that's why I say I think over the whole context, Weefer for me as well.
Good. I'd like to end this on a positive note. I think there's a lot at the current run and what we're doing at the moment that we can talk about and we can get ourselves in the doldrums a little bit. At this moment in time, you are 10th in the table. You're on the same points as Fulham and Bournemouth. You are very much in that run for 8th, which at this current point in time gives you a Europa Conference League spot. So, Bournemouth is on 48, right? So, very much in the race. Brentford are now in the race as well because they're a couple of points behind us. But still, at this point with 5 games to go, there is still something to play for. We got to this point last year towards the swan song of De Zerbi, where we were playing for absolutely nothing, right? Like it was very much, guys are on the beach. Let's just get this over and done with. Let's play these games and go home. Kind of how yesterday felt, even though it wasn't that. So you've got 5 games to go. You've got West Ham next. You've got, who's that? Newcastle, Wolves, Liverpool, Tottenham. Now, if we're able to get 3 wins out of that, if we're able to get as close to 60 points as we possibly can, we are in a good spot where you can probably or hope to achieve that 8th position. I feel 7th is too far gone now at 57. Like it feels like that's a little bit far. But I think West Ham is so important. That's next Saturday. I think it's Potter. It's a West Ham team that are 17th. So it's a team that are very bad this year, or the 4th worst team, shall we say, at the moment. If you get a win there, you suddenly think that this is going to be a nice little run. You've got Newcastle at home. Newcastle, very good. We tend to have good results against them. We seem to play well against them. Wolves, as inconsistent as you can come. Liverpool should be on the beach by the 19th of May. And then you're playing a 16th place Tottenham at the last game of the season, probably with Ange waving bye. So not the worst run-in when it comes to it. You would look at the Liverpool and the Newcastle and go, that's really bad. Liverpool should be on the beach by then. Newcastle, again, we seem to be doing oddly well against in recent form. So how are you feeling about the run-in and how are you feeling about our chances of 8?
I think with you, it hinges on what happens in that West Ham game. Yeah. And it's interesting, you go, given the form that the little period we've come through, I don't know whether that West Ham game with Potter, I don't know whether it's exactly the sort of game you want or whether it's the worst game you want. I can't decide. It's, again, I think to sum up like our whole season, like it will either be an incredibly high or a very low. Like I can see, because that the crowd will be up for it with Potter.
Do you think Potter will get booed again? Oh
yeah, definitely will. Like I think it'll probably be more pantomime. Yeah. I think than the Chelsea one, which was just pure hatred. Like I've not seen at a game at the Amex probably ever. I think he will do, but I think you've got that narrative sitting alongside it. So I think it's going to be a real defining moment, and I think it's a kind of it's one of those kind of sink or swim games to me, because there's so much on it. Like if we get a win there, results elsewhere, we could comfortably sit in 8th. It keeps you in the conversation regardless of what happens, builds a bit of momentum, all of that good stuff that comes off the back of it. But then if you lose it, because it's Potter, it then automatically becomes not just a loss, right?
It becomes
I think
painful.
it becomes something slightly more because of the Potter factor.
Yeah.
And you then get to a situation where in the space of a month, you've kind of lost to Palace, which is obviously in and of itself twice. You've then lost to Brentford, which is the kind of Tony Bloom, game that game that he definitely doesn't want to lose. And then if you lose to Potter, in the space of a month, you've had these 3 kind of games that, on paper they don't make any. They're still worth the same number of points on paper, right? But they
hurt a little more.
Yeah, they hurt a little bit more, and then you've had them in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
That I'm not suggesting that it becomes this kind of sink or swim thing for Hertzler per se, but do you know what I mean? Because it carries that extra weight.
Yeah.
And that's why I say I don't know whether it's a game that I don't know whether it's the sort of game that you want. Obviously, it is if you win it. It becomes exactly the sort of game you wanted. But if you don't, it becomes a nightmare to have slotted in the fixture list. And I know I'm sitting perfectly on the fence with that. But
I don't want to be the guy to do this, but they also haven't won since February. So
the Dr. Brighton will see you now, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, I think we'll win. To be honest, I think we will win. I think we'll win.
I think the squad will be up for it. Yeah. I think Dunk and Van Hecker, they should be up for it, playing against the next manager that left us in a very good period. They'll get on really well and they'll be mates and all that. But this is one where you can get another one over someone that decided not to be here. And I think that's where the pantomime nature comes in. That's where this crowd should be a little bit more up for it, right? You've got Evan Ferguson, who's there as well, who has done absolutely nothing there, which is a real shame from another side of thing. But it's a game that Phils must win. I agree with you. I think this is something that we need to go in. We need to start strong for once, please. And you saw it with the 4-1 against Chelsea under De Zerbi as well. Like an early goal just lifts. You saw Crystal Palace last year when we beat them 4-1 at home. Like they're the sort of games where you need to run out from the first whistle and really get after it.
To kind of segue it off, that is obviously the issue that we've seen in this game, right? That we've just finished. We need to see something different.
Yes. To your point as well, and to a very subjective point, to enjoy it again, right? So to watch us play football in a way that we feel we can play. And I think that's ultimately where we are. And
I can probably boil it down. Like I say, my final comment of it, the whole enjoyment thing, which is that period of those games post-Forest 7-0, I was quite vocal in our group about I really enjoyed those games for very specific reasons, because we really looked like we were up for it.
Yeah.
We're fighting for every ball, especially to win the ball back, the speed. Like it just looked like we were... It looked like a team that was hungry for it and was really enjoying playing.
Yeah.
And, Danny Welbeck's comment yesterday about it looked like the team wasn't playing for each other.
That's tough to hear.
That is tough to hear. But that comment sort of when I'm like the games that have not been super enjoyable to watch this year, that sentence basically distills why it's difficult to watch.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But to finish on a positive, I think if we can display those characteristics that we showed consistently in those 6 games,
that we know we can.
Not that long ago. I think we'll be absolutely fine. But it's what that's weird. It sounds weird to say it off the back of me just saying not enjoyed some of those games, but it's sort of the jeopardy of it, right? Whether we do it or not is the heart of the jeopardy of why we watch this game.
Yeah, and I think the crowd should be up for it. Team should be up for it, especially those that played under Potter should be up for it. No João Pedro, right? So he's probably out 3, maybe even 4 if they upgrade it. So you are going to see Welbeck. You're very likely to see O'Reilly again. Just
need Van Hecker to be fit.
No Van Hecker. So it'd be interesting to see what the team is. We should be more than capable of putting this team away. It is a game that I feel will define where we sit at the end of the season and how good or bad we feel about it. But I feel we can do it. I have an inkling that I think there is something here that we can flip a switch and we can get after it. I think some very poor results, and I think the team have to look themselves in the face a little bit and understand these last 5 games will determine whether you finish for Europe or whether you finish in the bottom half potentially. So the good thing is there's something to play for. You should be motivated. You should be riled up to beat Graham Potter at home as well. I'm looking forward to that game. But we'll take a look next week. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we close?
No, I think that's it, actually.
I think we're good.
I think we've been largely, I think we have been largely positive, I think. And I think for whatever it is, I think we're always reasonably balanced, I think.
Mm-hmm.
At least we try to be balanced. And I think reflecting the comments, I think we've covered everything. Everyone knows we need to strengthen defense.
There's a general agreement across a lot of the fan base, isn't there? That everyone can have their moans and not like things. You're well within your right as a paying customer or as a paying supporter or fan. You are absolutely within your right to feel the way that you want to feel. My personal opinion is that we can still get Europe.
Yeah, I think so. I'm with you as well. And I just think it's important to be able to have the nuance of it, to come back to go and be very clear, which is not sitting here going, I'm upset we're 10th, right? No sensible person is sitting there with that opinion. But I think the problem, sometimes it doesn't allow you to then, if you say you're not happy with certain aspects of it, people kind of jump on that and go, oh, but so you're entitled to think we should be higher than 10. I think it's really important to be able to have the nuanced discussion within it, which I think we try and have. We try
and put it together some way or another. But there are certain people that again have followed this club for a very, very long time. I know I've got the best part of 25 years under me now, ever since I was a little boy. So you are entitled to feel the way you want to feel. You've seen this team at lows. We've seen them in the round of 16 of the Europa League, right? We know what this team is capable of. And I think achieving Europe this year would be exceeding expectations. And I think we should be aiming for that.
Agreed.
Which is an oxymoron, by the way. You can't do that. Cool. All right. We'll be back next week after the West Ham game. I think we'll probably be very close to this time next week. So Sunday around 4 or 5 p.m. UK time. If you're subscribed and all that stuff, it will let you know. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a great rest of your Easter. Enjoy it. And we'll speak to you all next week.